Welcome to Watch, Review, Repeat. This is the podcast where two best friends discuss the latest in film and television and then do it all over again the following week. My name is Colton Brown, and joining me is Andrew Meadows. Hello, sir.
Colton Brown, how are you?
Doing well.
Healthy?
Yes, healthy, staying healthy. Hope you're doing the same.
Yeah, always. Well, not always, but at least for right now.
In these current times, it's certainly important to stay
it's more
safe.
Than some. That's right.
Yeah, especially in states where everything's just totally normal, right? Everything's normal down there, right?
Everything's normal in Florida.
Nothing to see here. Don't look at the latest numbers for coronavirus cases. Everything's fine. Nothing to see here. Move along. Jedi mind trick. Move along.
So it's that meme of that dog with the house burning down. Everything's fine.
This is fine. Yes. Yeah. Philadelphia has moved to quote unquote yellow, so like outdoor dining is allowable and stuff like that. So it's kind of opening up a little bit slowly but surely up here. But important to reiterate, nothing has really changed, to be honest. We just got a text from our resident medical expert, Dr. Enrique Jamie, who joined us for a Patreon episode most recently, saying how they basically still don't know anything about the damn thing, about the virus. So it's, we urge our listeners to try to stay safe and it's understandable. You want to get back to a sense of normalcy. You want to go hang out with your friends. You want to go to the bar and stuff. And I get it. I miss some of that too. Although sometimes I'm content to hang out at home, to be honest. We urge people to just stay safe and be responsible and,
that's it. Just be responsible. I think that's probably the largest thing of it.
Not here to tell people how to live their lives, but I think it's okay to, understand
and be
the bigger picture of things. And so we hope that we can at least put that out there. Other than that, it's about the same old up here. I have to say, it's sometimes a struggle to like think about the fact that movies, movie theaters are still not really a thing, although I guess they're probably close to being a thing down there. But, I miss the fact that we haven't had the opportunity to watch so many good movies that were theoretically, supposedly good movies or hopefully good movies. We're just missing out on so much stuff. But
escape.
So we've had to turn our attention elsewhere, and we looked again to streaming services for the second or third month in a row for this episode with the latest Spike Lee joint, To Five Bloods, over on Netflix, which comes in a very very timely way to the backdrop of protests against police brutality and white supremacy, and certainly it's a film that hits on a lot of themes that that are being kind of brought up in those protests. So it's an interesting film to watch, I think, in this current time. On our last episode, we spent a lot of time talking about what's happening in the world. We tried to give some recommendations on consuming media from Black voices, and lo and behold, here comes Spike Lee, who is a very prominent figure in Hollywood, who wears his feelings on his sleeve, when he makes his films, and I think this one's no exception. So it'll be interesting to I think talk about it in a little bit further depth. And obviously, it's talking about more than just that. Black Klansman is maybe the more timely in those particular issues, but this certainly resonates with certain aspects that the film deals with.
I think this one's a little bit less on the nose,
right?
About just straight up race. Like, it's definitely prevalent. It is what the movie is about, but I think it does it under a different lens, and it makes it less prominent, to where you can. I don't know. It's just a different kind of movie than Klansman,
for sure.
Although,
no, absolutely.
I did thoroughly enjoy Klansman, but I did enjoy this as well. I enjoyed the nuance in this one.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll be talking about To Five Bloods in full detail in just a little while. I want to issue a friendly reminder to our listeners that we do have a Patreon episode available exclusively at the moment for supporters on Patreon. Again, with our resident medical expert, Dr. Enrique Jamie. He joined us to talk about coronavirus, viruses in general, 6 films around viruses. So I urge our listeners to maybe head to our Patreon page, patreon.com/watchreviewrepeat, if they have any interest in listening to that. I think it's good. It's timely to listen to. It's informative and hopefully entertaining as well. It's obviously kind of the hope. But we hope it's a bit of both. And we talked about some good films on there. We talked, quite a variety of genres and different sorts of viruses and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot in there that can be gained, I think, from listening to that episode. So we encourage our supporters to do so. Now, moving on, I guess moving back in a way to Five Bloods. Is there any fun fact that you can give to our listeners about this film, maybe its subject matter, anything along those lines?
Yeah, so I think nothing is more like fact oriented or than warfare. Like, I mean, you can derive all sorts of interesting facts from warfare and from, the causes and from countries and just the numbers and the statistics, and I think there's a lot to be gathered from a conflict like that. So I don't have a lot, but one of the and I guess it's kind of a spoiler because I think the statistics actually put on the front right there in the beginning of the movie of the Five Bloods.
Well, if it's in the beginning, it's not much of a spoiler. So.
I guess you're right. That's true. But in Vietnam, African Americans accounted for 25% of all enlisted Army soldiers, but they only make up 13% of our population in America, which is staggering. It's huge. It's ridiculous. But prior, it's interesting. This is what I think is interesting is prior to the 1960s, African Americans were viewed as they didn't serve on the front lines as often because they were viewed as what's the word I'm looking for?
Inferior, lesser.
Inferior. That's it. Inferior. They were inferior soldiers, so they weren't allowed to be on the front line. Fast forward to the 1960s, 1970s, or whatever for the Vietnam, and now they're allowed to be on the front line during the. This is during Martin Luther King and that movement. What is that name of that movement?
The Civil Rights Movement.
The Civil Rights Movement. I am not a fucking historian. I apologize, but you view that at the same time. At the same time as that, Confederate monuments and everything are being erected in the South. Not all at the same time. A lot of those monuments were erected, I think, in the early 1900s. But the second peak of those monuments being erected happened during the Civil Rights Movement. So you have Confederate monuments being erected in the South. You have people fighting in the streets about not giving black people rights. You have not more, but 25% of all enlisted Army soldiers are black, although they only account for 13% of the American population. I think those are all staggering numbers happening at a very critical time in our country's history. I think it's a real, I don't know. There's just a lot of things happening at once, especially for black folks. So it's
yeah, and this is a movie that dives headfirst into kind of reconciling that disproportionate percentage of black soldiers fighting this war, and the question of well, what is it they're actually fighting for, and what happens when they are done fighting and they come back to this country. What does that mean? And so it's an interesting kind of look at that. And I think something that we kind of talked about prior to this episode is I don't think it's something that either of us have really been exposed to, and I think we both are probably ignorant in some respects about the exact nature of the Vietnam War in terms of the specifics. Obviously, we didn't live through it. Doesn't mean we should know everything about it, but we know enough, but we certainly don't know the ins and outs of it and the way that you would know something if you lived through it. But this is highlighting something that I think, our textbooks growing up, when they talk about the Vietnam War, they're not talking about the black soldiers on the front lines. This is a forgotten chapter of history, I think, for I think most textbooks, I think probably for a lot of people, and certainly ourselves included. So
they gloss over that shit. Yeah. The Vietnam, I don't know. It's interesting to look at who gets paid for our textbooks in high schools and stuff like that. You follow the money, and I don't want to get conspiracy theory but it is interesting. We talked about an event that happened, I think, at the last podcast or the bonus episode that we don't hear about. I think maybe on Anna's recommendation, we talked about some the Oklahoma massacre or something.
Yeah.
There's things that are glossed over. The Vietnam War is one of these things. They just gloss over that shit. They don't want to talk about it because it's a war that we probably should not have been. I don't want to say we shouldn't have been involved because I'm not that educated on it, because I wasn't educated on it, but we may have potentially, nobody wants to talk about it, which is unfortunate because,
well, it certainly wasn't very popular at the time. And I think it's certainly, obviously people have strong feelings on war and wars that we've participated in as a country for good reason, I think, overall. And I think the Vietnam War is something that people have looked back on and thought that was a mistake. I don't think that's like an unpopular sentiment or anything like that. But yes, there's a lot more nuance that goes into that opinion than I think either of us are equipped to offer. But if nothing else, this is a film that sheds a light on something that you and I were again, admittedly ignorant on. And not that it's the most, it's not a documentary, obviously. And it's dealing with a lot of things. There's more to it than just that one singular focus. There's a lot that Spike Lee wants to try to talk about in this movie, and he does, and but it's not. It's we'll talk about it. Yeah, definitely. But it's good to have this kind of thing, and it sucks that this is the kind of thing that needs to propel this into the forefront of people's minds, ourselves included. We are not exempt from criticism here, but it's kind of a failure of this country and its institutions in general that this is what it takes for attention to be brought to something like this. And and it's why the protests are happening, is because people don't pay attention to that sort of thing. And so until you bring it to people's attention, nothing's going to change. Nothing. No one's going to give a shit. I mean, to be honest, like that's just kind of how things are. Most people, the people in power, are content with the status quo. It works for them. It doesn't work for others, obviously, but until the people that are being oppressed actually, bring light to that issue, it's hard for things to change. And it's a fucked up thing to say, and maybe this is getting a little bit off base in terms of what the scope of our podcast covers, and certainly what our two perspectives can really offer on this sort of thing. But, it is a fucked up thing to have to be at this point where you can say, shit, I didn't know a lot about this. I didn't know anything about this. And it's a disservice.
It's a disservice to absolutely everybody to have to view history or be educated on history through a fucking tinted glass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're at a point in history where we've never been more technologically advanced.
Sure.
We have unprecedented means to stop and record history. But we're presenting history through a tinted glass to our children, and to the future generations and everything else. And it's a huge disservice. Socially, it's a disservice, but also just on the front of education and on the front of grappling with future events. History is such an important thing. For it to be skewed and presented in a manner to make something sound better than what it was or what have you, it's a huge disservice, I think, to future generations. And it's kind of disgusting. I don't know. I just, like you said, it's one thing to have to learn something through a Netflix movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially something as big as the Vietnam War. It's a whole fucking war, almost an entire decade, and we don't know anything about it just because the government doesn't want to teach about it. It's fucked up.
Yeah, and I think, not to boil every single thought that we've just expressed into a single adage, but those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it. I think you can. I think there's variance on that particular quote, but it is kind of things in a nutshell of you have to be cognizant of the world around you, and it is unfortunate that we all can't experience things from an unbiased, unfiltered viewpoint. Obviously, just due to the nature of how the world
People
works, and how people themselves are. There's obviously some sort of tent that is always going to be present, but you can certainly educate yourself, and it's not wrong to, and it's important to do so. And so, yes, it's shitty that it comes to a Netflix film to again bring some attention to this sort of thing, but at the same time, here we are, and we do have it. So we've touched on certain aspects of kind of what this film delves into, and we will certainly delve into that in a little bit more depth in a little while. And I think we have a good conversation ahead of us from the sound of things, I would guess. So we can move into some news before we jump back into The Five Bloods, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, let's do it. What do we got?
Well, it's the first time in a little while I feel like we've had some COVID-19 induced delays. I feel like, right out the gate, that first month or so, shit was just moving all over the place, and then it kind of quieted down because, there's a lot of uncertainty, and, the uncertainty has obviously continued to some extent, and it's now having some repercussions in terms of theatrical releases and in terms of a couple of other events and such. So first up, WB has made some big moves overall. Tenet has finally been delayed, although not quite where I expected it to be delayed to. It has been pushed back a grand total of, count them, 2 weeks to the end of July. I think it's July 31st is when it's now set for. And in its place on July 17th, its original release date, WB is going to be putting out Inception back into cinemas for its 10th anniversary, which 10 years since Inception is honestly
that's nuts.
Kind of mind-blowing in its own way, I feel. I can't tell if this is coming across on the recording. So if anyone's hearing an ice cream truck, I feel like it's been driving back and forth for like an hour now.
I can't hear it.
All right. Well, I might just be talking to myself then, but for the listeners, maybe if you have some good headphones in, I'm not sure what's capturing it right now, but it's driving me insane. So I thought I'd acknowledge it in case it was an elephant in the room. Anyway, touching on what else is going on in WB land, it's got Tenet moving that 2 weeks. I'm still expecting it to move further. Basically, it seems like there's this weird tug of war between WB execs and Christopher Nolan, where the execs are like, yeah, we can move this to whenever. And Nolan, I think, wants it to be positioned as just like, people need the theater experience. They need to see this movie. And I'm like, I totally agree with that. Like, I'm not watching Tenet on VOD. Like, I'm not doing that. But I'm also not like going to go to a theater probably on July 31st, to be honest. Like, unless there's a vaccine that gets magically developed and dispersed within that time period, between then and now. I think it's even more prevalent now. That ice cream truck, it's just swinging by again.
It's like you live on a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, basically.
Around in circles.
So I know I'm still. I think I'm hoping that it honestly moves back a little bit. I know I predicted that it would move to Dune's release date in December, and hopefully that doesn't happen. But I don't know. It just seems like a bad move at this point to bank on things opening by the end of July. I don't know. Theater's going to have to operate at such a weird capacity of literally reduced seating capacity, groups being spaced out, masks maybe being worn, but I saw something, I forget what theater company it was, just like, you need to wear masks in the lobby, but you don't have to wear them in the auditorium because you got to chomp down on your popcorn. And it's just like I know theaters like make their money off concessions and stuff like that, but like there's a certain thing when like, you have to put in place so many restrictions on certain things. Like,
it's not the same experience.
It's just a bad idea in general. Like if you have, I know your favorite sport of all time, baseball. They put together this like 50-page packet of like the restrictions they were going to put into place so that they could safely play the game of baseball. I'm like, if you have to do all this, like, honestly, like, we can wait. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know people need entertainment, and I know I just said something at the top of the episode about like, man, I miss not being able to see movies, but it's kind of just like, yeah, it sucks, but it doesn't mean that I want to like put my health on the line or risk, the safety of others.
Right.
And yeah, potentially literally, indirectly / directly cause someone's death. Like, I don't know. And I kind of just feel like if you're a movie studio, it's almost an irresponsible decision to make of just being like, here's this brand new movie, the first new movie in months. And like I get it. You want to have that sort of thing because your hope is that you make a lot of money from it. But I just, at what cost, I guess, is the question I pose to that. So I don't know. It's tough. But basically, as a result of Tenet moving, it means that Mulan is now positioned to be the first big movie because it actually is supposed to open July 24th, a week ahead of it. And so now the ball's kind of in Disney's court of, well, what's Disney going to do with Mulan? Are they going to move it? Are they going to, are they going to say, yeah, fuck it, we'll be the litmus test for this? I don't know. It's a bad position to be put in. And, I'm not going to like, have any tears over the fact that, the Disney and their billions of dollars are going to have to reconcile, like, what do we do here? But it's a tough position. And I just worry about what's going to happen, I guess. At the same time, I really want to see these movies. I really want to see Tenet. I'd love to see it in IMAX. I just don't know that I'd be comfortable seeing it day one, July 31st, unless I could absolutely guarantee that I'm sitting in there with myself and only myself. And realistically, I just don't know what that's going to look like. But
long sleeves, gloves, and a mask.
Well, it's good for you, but you can't exactly bank on everyone else around you to do the same thing. So that's also part of the problem. And you'd hope that there would be some sort of restrictions in place to have that, but
Well, how would you feel, Colton, if it's a serious discussion, okay? Because I'm craving to go to the fucking movie theaters.
Yeah, absolutely. I am
fucking
too.
Open. Florida's wide fucking open.
Yeah. And I think Florida would be absolutely content to have Tenet start playing tomorrow.
Fuck yeah. Now, here's the question. If the movie theater opens tomorrow, and well, the movie theaters, I don't think they're open. They can be open, but they got nothing to play, so they're not open. But if the movie theater had show times, and I'll admit, I have not been wearing a mask. I have been sanitizing religiously at work. But then again, I'm in a position where I don't need to be right next to anybody. I sit behind a desk and can do finance and stuff like that. Not right up on anybody. But if I were to acquire a mask and hand sanitizer or potentially gloves, can I go to the movie theater? Is that socially responsible? Or is it supporting a bad thing?
I don't know.
What's the right answer for that?
It's a tough question for the consumer because, we're starved. And you want, again, of course you want the new thing. You want that back. You want that in your life again. And yeah, maybe it'll be fine. Maybe there's a good chance it'll be fine. It's hard to, there's no way to know. There's a lot of X factors of how many people are going to be in there. How strictly are they actually enforcing these policies? Are you in there with your mask off, chomping down on popcorn and slurping down your 54-ounce soda? What are you doing? Right? But I don't know.
Can Corona live in a Long Island iced tea? I ask you.
You can control. I think you could get some of it ingested as you're drinking your Long Island iced teas. I would guess. Not a doctor, but certainly possible. I would think. Yeah, it's there's things that you can control, and there's things that you cannot control, and you cannot control the behavior of others, and that would be my concern, honestly. Just logistically, is I'd like to sit 3 rows away from the next nearest person, but I worry that that's not feasible, and so that's
you got that one asshole that wants to get in front of you, like walk in front of you, he's fucking sneezing and hacking.
Yeah. And like, honestly,
and then you got the shithead kids from like when we watched Lego Movie running around the theater sneezing and touching, and No.
And I think there's a very legitimate concern that is possible, you know? And so it's hard to just want to potentially expose yourself to that environment. But Christopher Nolan says you got to have the theater experience. So here we are. I don't know. I just again, I hope that the decision doesn't have to fall on the consumer to be, what do I do here? I look, I get it. The studios want to make money. They want to kind of be that first one to break the barrier. But I just, we live in unprecedented times with a literal global pandemic. I just think there are bigger concerns at hand. But just my 2 cents on it. I think it's a tough thing. I don't think it's an easy thing. I will be genuinely tempted to watch Tenet July 31st if it does indeed debut on July 31st. I will have to have that conversation with myself.
When I go out and see it on IMAX and tell you it's the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I'll have to have that conversation with myself. But we do have a little over a month until that date arrives, so there's a lot of unknowns.
Might have a vaccine. Who knows?
And we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens. But they have shuffled around some other things. Sorry, got a little long-winded there. But Wonder Woman's moved back again from August 14th to October 2nd.
Okie dokie.
I think those are kind of the two big ones, and then there's some kind of long-term ones that weren't really super close to being released that have been moved around. So there's a Godzilla vs. Kong movie that was supposed to release in November. And that's now been bumped back to May of 2021, so that's almost a full year away. The Matrix 4 was originally supposed to have that May 21st, 2021 date, and now that's being pushed back also almost an entire year to April 1st of 2022. And I think that's really kind of... There's a couple others that they shuffled around, but I think those 4 movies, Tenet, Wonder Woman, Matrix, and Godzilla vs. Kong. I think those are kind of the big 4, I would think, for WB overall, that they've kind of had to shuffle things around. And I don't think this is the end of things. If things really aren't that much better in October, at a certain point, push comes to shove, the studios are going to want the business to come on, even if it's at a reduced amount. But I don't know. If it's so hard to project. And so I think things are always continually evolving as a result. But I don't know. I like the thought of October being time for Wonder Woman, and I hope I get to see Wonder Woman in October. But we'll just have to see how things kind of play out. But anyway, WB has also announced something else. They've announced DC FanDome. Which they're describing as a mega 24-hour immersive virtual fan experience that will feature anything and everything from the DC multiverse, and it's all free. So this is basically like a 24-hour online DC convention of sorts. And it sounds neat. They're saying that it's going to touch on video games, movies, TV shows, comics. So you're going to hear. They've said that you're going to get details on, pretty much anything and everything DC related, but I think all the CW stuff obviously is in there. The Batman, they've talked about, they're going to be given some details on the Batman, Black Adam, the Suicide Squad. So you're getting some new movie content. I'm sure we'll get some stuff on Wonder Woman, because this will precede its new release date in October. So, it's kind of a neat idea, now that everyone's hopefully still stuck indoors, or at least staying indoors, as much as possible, we should say. This is kind of a fun way to engage with fans, and we're in a world where most comic book conventions are not proceeding, although I think Tampa Bay Comic Book Convention is rolling on in August or something like that.
What? No.
Great idea. Have thousands of people in an indoor environment. What could go wrong? But I like this. I think this is fun. And I'm hopeful that, in lieu of the fact that we're not getting San Diego Comic-Con in its usual fashion this year, that you get some pretty exciting announcements. I think it'd be badass if we saw some more like stuff from the Batman. I think that sounds great.
Like drop a trailer?
Yeah, I don't know if it's too early for a trailer, and I know they had to press pause on filming, but they have footage there. I mean, they could cut something together there. And
Are
I think
people is Hollywood filming right now?
I think it's ramping back up. I think I think obviously it depends on where the production is. I think production in non-American territories, I think, are getting fast-tracked a little bit better because other countries have handled their pandemic responses a little bit better. And so I think that there are things that are, getting back up and running relatively soon. I think I saw something about the new Jurassic World kind of being the first one to kind of restart its production in the imminent future. But I think we'll start to see productions ramping back up. And, in a way that's obviously could be troublesome in its own respect, but certainly if you're in an area where, the virus has been, largely contained and you've had your production crew and cast quarantined and self-isolated for 14 days, then, there's a way, I think, to try to make that still feasible to get these films back on track and not super delayed on the back end. So yeah.
Which it's going to be real interesting to see what they do. I mean, if everybody's filming, if Hollywood's ramping up productions and nothing's being released, what do they do with this backlog of fucking content? We've never had anything like this before.
I mean, I think 2021 is going to be busy as fuck. We are not going to take we're not taking a week off then. I might have exams in spring of 2021, but god damn it, there's a movie coming out every week. I think you're just going to feel the packed nature of, I think especially in a post-vaccine world where there really isn't,
everything's
still
100%
the lingering concern,
on.
when you're like, we're back on, like you're just going to have that backlog of content that's just going to be.
Hollywood's going to want to cash out, but do they surely they stagger the releases out to make it
I think it'll have to be, I think it'll be spaced out, and I think some of it will kind of back up, but I think there'll be an onslaught here and there. I think there'll be periods of it, and the next piece of news I think will possibly touch on that as well, or at least my speculation on that will touch on that as well. But yeah, I think you're going to see an onslaught here and there of just a barrage of content, films really most notably. I mean, TV shows will kind of, I think, probably largely still be the same, although certain things have been affected, like some of the CW shows literally didn't finish, so their seasons are over, but like their first episode of the next season's probably going to be like the season finale of the previous season. It's kind of weird.
Gotcha.
It's kind of a weird thing, and I'm sure that's happened with other shows too, of just being like, well, fuck, we got what we got, and we'll figure it out at some point. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. So, that other piece of news that I was just alluding to, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has announced that the 93rd Academy Awards, the 2021 Oscars, are being delayed by a couple months. Usually takes place late February, early March, and they've announced that it's going to take place in April 25th, so late April, as a result of, the pandemic. Right. So, and I think what they've done as a result is they've changed the eligibility rules for qualifying films. So it usually, I think, runs through like very early January, or late December, somewhere around there, but they've pushed that to the end of February of 2021. So
damn.
Yeah, and so I think what you're going to see is, you usually have a flood of content towards the end of the year, to try to, in January, to qualify for the Oscars. But I think if you're hoping optimistically that, things are mostly on track by January of next year, then I think you're going to see a fuck ton of movies being released in that 2-month window. I think your usual dead periods of January and February, where you're looking at the Bloodshots of the world, as you did this year, I think it's going to be a very different story. Films. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of content in January and February because of the backlog that we just talked about of like, well, we want to get this out, and especially if these studios think that it's going to be quality shit,
Well, here's another
and it hasn't been released
thing.
yet. They're going to have to put it out at some point. So
when you have a backlog of content like we're going to be seeing for the next couple of, for the foreseeable future, what's that do to production houses and stuff that, what's it do to the noise of like films coming out? Does that make sense? Like normally there's kind of like an up and down kind of like like a I can't ever find my words anymore. I don't know what the deal is. There's like a pulse to the quality of films that come out. Like you say, you know what I mean? Usually you have a period of time where you got shit films and then you got good films. What does this do to the pulse of film? Are we putting out blood shots now? Or are they going to say, fuck that, we're just going to deliver heavy hitting films for a consistent period? Or
I don't know. I mean, I think the business model is going to have to change in the sense that
because they're going to have to recoup funds. They're going to have to recoup money. So is it fucking not Scarlet Witch, Black Widow, followed by Dune, followed by just heavy hitting movie after heavy hitting movie for the next couple years, and then we're going to see like a sharp decline in quality where we have like 2 years of bloodshot movies.
I don't think it'll be quite to that effect, but yeah, I think you're going to have, like I said, that barrage of content. And I also think that, especially if there isn't really any hope on the horizon, like I think you're going to see studios embracing VOD.
They would have to. Why wouldn't they? Right.
And I think your traditional indies that probably would have had some decent play in theaters are going to have reduced play for the foreseeable future, and so they're probably going to be better off just distributing those direct to consumers and hoping for the best.
And those are good for the stream. That's good for the platform.
I think, even in a post-vaccine world, I think you're still going to see implications of it. I mean, AMC is in dire straits right now. Maybe AMC doesn't come out of this alive. Maybe not. I'm sure other companies will pick up those theaters and they'll still be operating as theaters, but AMC as a company might be dead in the water. Maybe. We'll see. I think you'll feel repercussions of this for a long, long time. And I think it'll be more than just lots of movies getting backlogged to dump them, week after week after week. But I think distribution models are going to change. And
they have to, surely.
I think we'll see a change, a shift and certain attitudes and platforms and stuff like that. And I don't know that we quite can project how that's going to look moving into the future, because I think, again, there's just so many unknowns of, you can open in July, but are you making money back in July? Are most theaters even nationwide open? Are your big theaters in New York still closed because New York's not in a rush to open things back up with the state of things.
Fuck no,
certainly in the city, a little bit better outside of the city, to be fair, but and potentially, if certain governors get their, head back on their shoulders, maybe there's a common sense move to just shut things back down. You've seen in certain states, bars basically just being like, oh, there was a massive outbreak of the coronavirus to our patrons that were back here. Maybe we shouldn't be operating at this time. And it's just like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't. And so do the theaters kind of fall into that sort of thing?
Does that actually happen?
Yeah, I've seen it in Jacksonville. I saw an article about that. It was like confirmed 14 cases from like one night of just people being in the same environment. It's just like, it's kind of how it works, isn't it?
God damn it! What? Why is
and the sad
so
thing,
fucking stupid?
And the thing is,
so
one of the people that got it, healthcare professional. It's just like you think the one person that would have some understanding of this. You'd hope.
As a different,
but anyway,
I don't know. Yeah, whatever.
But anyway,
that's Florida, dude. It's fucking wild west down here, man.
It's just not Florida. It's not just Florida, man. It's other states too. Texas is hanging out with you. Georgia, Arizona. I'm sure there's other pockets too that are content to just stick their fingers in their ears and say la 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 for a while. But
I don't know. That's what they're doing. I think they're just saying fuck it.
Yeah. Well, I wonder where they learned that behavior from. Moving on, the last of kind of COVID-19 induced delays, I guess in this case, sort of cancellation. Star Wars Celebration was scheduled for Anaheim of 2020. I forget exactly when it was supposed to be this year. But they've canceled it for 2020. They've rescheduled it for not next year, but the following year, August of 2022, will be the next time that Star Wars Celebration returns.
And we will be going. And we'll be recording live on the floor.
I'm kind of feeling like, 2 years away. Fuck, I could probably do that. I sure as shit would. I mean, even regardless of circumstances, there's no way I would have been able to swing it this year. But
no,
like 2022, I'm like, hopefully I'll be working. I could take some vacay. Yeah,
we can make that fucking work.
We can do that
if it's in California. Yeah, fuck yeah.
So yeah, I do think about this, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of good news. I'm not,
they announced it early enough to where we can fucking plan for it.
The flip side of this is like, I don't like Disney's going to have to do something with their Star Wars projects because we don't really know what's happening on that front, at least in terms of the film slate. Like, we have like Taika Waititi's making a movie, and Rian Johnson's maybe going to make some movies, but he's making some other movies first, and D&D are not making movies, so.
It's very big. I
feel like this year would have been like the time for them to like lay out a slate, a Kevin Feige, Marvel Studios type slate of like, yeah, we got this coming. Yeah, we got this coming. So I don't know if they'll still do that at some point this year. But if nothing else, at least hopefully we get that news at some point this year, maybe just through like a virtual like announcement. And in 2022 come Celebration, maybe we've had one or two things that have dropped in the interim, and we'll have things to look forward to and new surprises, and hopefully we'll be able to buy a shit ton of things in August 2022 if we get a chance to go. Spend so much money. VIP passes, baby.
That's what we're going to do. You heard it here first. We will be in Anaheim 2022.
Yeah. Knock on wood. So yeah, all right, moving on to just kind of, this was the last of the news. That was a lot of talk about delays and stuff like that, and I apologize for going way longer than I intended with this, but we have a habit of doing that, don't we? Cops, Live PD, your reality police television shows are gonzo. They have been canceled in the wake of protests and uprisings against, speaking out against police brutality, and yeah, I mean, Live PD was one of, I think, the highest rated shows on A&E, so it's certainly a decision that's going to affect their bottom line in a big way. Cops, obviously, is kind of like its own meme in its own sort of
fucking
way for years and years. So yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of a big fucking deal in its own way. I mean, I'm not upset by this, honestly.
I've watched a lot of Cops in my day. I've seen a
fair share of Cops. I've seen, honestly, a decent amount of Live PD.
Never watched any Live PD. Always Cops.
And I would be lying if I said that I didn't, find entertainment in both of them at some point in my life. But I'm fully okay with this. I guess I'll say, in the sense that, I think especially now when you have the microscope on police behavior and Live PD embroiled in a pretty fucked up kind of scandal of sorts. I don't know if you've heard anything about this, but they basically captured footage of the death of a suspect at
Jesus
police hands, and they made the brilliant decision to just erase all their footage and not share that to investigators or make anything known of that.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking. That's a big deal.
So, they like to tell this whole thing about like, we're just trying to, shed a light on this and show how the police operate, the good and bad of the police, and we're transparent about things. And we deleted that thing, and it wasn't even like it was an accident. It was just like, yeah, we just deleted it, and okay. So I don't know. I'm not upset about this, I guess, is what I'm saying.
No, that seems pretty fucking sketchy. I don't think it's a here we go. I'm drawing a blank again. Hot
take?
I don't think it's a hot take to say that policing is a difficult task and that under certain circumstances people will get hurt. I don't think there's some fucking bad people out there. And bad people will get hurt, you know what I mean, in certain circumstances. I don't think that's a hot take at all. But at the same time, I don't know. When you watch Cops, you catch the fucking drunk guy that pulled over on the side of the road, and if anything, this might be a hot take. Imagine Cops. So you have, there's a huge misunderstanding about the dissolving of police, the dissolving of God damn it, help me out. I can't talk. God damn it. I'm on a fucking podcast and I can't talk.
The defund the police movement.
Defund the police movement, right. The
Yeah.
defunding of police departments. And people think, oh, it's just going to be the Wild Wild West. No, it's kind of like a restructuring and a re-envisionment of the police department, right? Because there's always going to be a need to fucking police. There's going to be bad people, and you always need cops. You always need them. But how cool would it be to still have cops, but to show the difference in cops, to show a more educated cop, to show a better, more equipped cop to deal with certain things. You know what I mean? And it'll almost transcend the movement to where you can see the difference in policing.
And honestly,
that'd be cool.
I think it's even a step further than just the education. You know, you can throw as much money at police forces as you want to get better training and stuff like that. But I think a lot of it stems from the range of things that police are expected to do, and how.
That's right. You need to granulate that fucking cone.
And I think a lot of the point of defunding the police is police should be specialized for those situations where there's a discernible violent crime or potentially sometimes nonviolent crime, I suppose. But an actual discernible threat to the safety, to the community. That's the thing that you need that you want the police there to respond to, and obviously you don't want them responding to that with racial biases or anything along those lines. No. I feel like that obviously goes without saying, although obviously in practice you can see what happens. But, mental health emergencies should be handled by people,
a professional,
to understand that and to handle that efficiently and effectively. Drug overdoses, addicts shouldn't be treated as the enemy. They should be treated as people that need help, and, locking them up and saying, oh, golden cold turkey this way. It's just not helpful. It's not helpful. And it just...
There's a fucking cone, like a food pyramid, man. You need to granulate your shit. Granulate it.
And there's a way that you can reorganize and restructure a police system to still have police and present and doing their job,
because there is a place for a cop,
but a more specific version of that job that they are actually trained and equipped to handle, as opposed to just this weird catch-all that we've now developed the system into, where we just throw millions of dollars at that and take money from other things. It's like, the fundamental misunderstanding, right, like you said, is the Wild Wild West. Abolish the police. Now, some people have said abolish the police.
That's stupid. We don't want to do that. I don't want to do that.
I don't know if I'm quite really willing to subscribe to that, but I think, the idea of something is fundamentally wrong, we need to do something about that. And I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's certainly an understandable standpoint to take, especially if you are, on the receiving end of that.
That's true.
And we're fortunate enough that due to the circumstances of our birth, we don't have that sort of experience, that lived-in experience, to offer up for that, but we can certainly still see it and understand it and respond to it. So, yes, we're getting off kind of on a side note
but
here
this is the perfect episode to talk about this stuff on.
For sure,
it's a Spike Lee movie that we're here to talk about it. So
for sure, and talking, bringing it back to cops and live PD and stuff like that. It's like you don't need that sort of thing to normalize the behavior. And yeah, maybe it's looking at the good and bad, but it's kind of just it's perpetuating this idea of cops as saviors, and that's just not honestly the reality of the situation. I'm not saying that every police officer is a bad person, and I'm not saying that. But I think that you can certainly say that there's a system that is broken and needs some assistance. I'll say very lightly, and I think it's okay to understand that, even if you are part of the system. It's okay to understand that, and I think not get defensive about that and feel like it's some sort of attack on you.
I think if you were to have a discussion, and this is going out on a limb, okay, but I think if you were to have a discussion with any person that's in any sort of capacity in that realm. I think if you just ask them broad questions about certain particular topics, I think they would say there's better ways to handle the situation. There's different. There's some way. Now, the way we go about it is something that needs to be discussed. But that's why we live in the beautiful country of America, right? Let's have a discussion. Let's move forward, and let's figure out what we need to do in order to correct the problem, right? And the inability to fucking discuss anything is terrible. Like, why can we not have a discussion? Why can't we recognize problems and then discuss them? Everybody can agree that the death of George Floyd is a fucking travesty. It's fucking terrible. But the second we start to criticize something, anybody criticizes anything, everybody's up in arms. No.
I think we can agree that the murder of George Floyd is a travesty.
Yes.
You know?
I don't know. Maybe did I say death? Probably
you said death. And his death is a tragedy. It's a travesty, but it's a preventable
murder,
thing,
right?
And it's something that you can pinpoint what happened.
Exactly.
You can watch what happened. You can see what happened. It's out there, and it's something that is not the first time something like that has happened.
It's
In fact, it's happened since, and in Atlanta. And it's happened many, many times before that. And it's just something, if killing unarmed black men and women, it's something
awake
that
or asleep.
You can identify that as, hey, this is an objectively wrong thing to do.
Exactly. Let's have a discussion about what the fuck is happening.
Maybe we should have a conversation about, well, why does this keep happening? How does this keep happening? And you see that there are some fundamental things, I think, that point you in the direction of, oh, that's how. Oh, that's why.
And that's just it. I think, everybody can, I think just about everybody can agree. I haven't talked to one person, even in my little area here of where I'm at. Everybody agrees that what happened is terribly wrong. Everybody.
And I guess the difference is people just don't, like I don't know. People just seem to get defensive.
They do. And
the idea of changing things or like pushing back against like.
But something needs to change, and that's just it.
Right.
Let's have a discussion. And anyway, so if in that discussion it includes the chopping of live PD and cops, and I guess that's what we have. I will always remember bad boys, what you gonna do? And
sure.
And the methed out white guys on the side of the street just getting pulled over by the cops or running from the cops or whatever, I don't know. I found
and you know what, and I can admit, I've found humor in that situation, but you pull back a little bit and you say, like, honestly, that person's life is just fucked up, and this is just showing how fucked up their life is, and I'm like, me
finding humor in it is all that could probably be looked at as, I should probably not find that humorous. I should probably find that in my heart concerning. It's sad. It's sad that that's happening. And that's just it. That's just it, isn't it? We're often manipulated by the things we're shown.
It's presented as entertainment, not
correct.
as a story of.
You put different music to it.
And,
you put different. You put it under a different lens. You put it under a tinted glass, like to go back to the way we're viewing history. And now all of a sudden, now the person that's on Cops is a sympathetic character. And that's just it. It's what we're being fed. So if they cut the cord to that, and then it's hard to disagree with it. Yeah.
And I guess for me, it's not a case of, oh, we can't have police in media. We can't have representation of police in media.
No, of course you can't.
I don't think it's a blanket kind of question of, oh, we can't have this anymore. I think it's a question of how do you present that, and I've seen people being like, even like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, of being like, oh, should we still like this thing? And it's like,
yeah, you can like it.
It's an obviously satirical, humorous take on that, whereas I think Live PD and Cops are kind of a manipulative, version of, it's real fucking things that are happening. I think it's a different thing to see a quote unquote reality show, manipulated for our entertainment versus a scripted thing that lampoons this whole organization, this whole structure, this system. And yeah, there's still problems you can still recognize, even if you're laughing at the scripted entertainment. But
and that's just it. I find
know.
myself. It's one of those things. Cops is a perfect situation. I find myself, nowadays, like feeling. Should I feel bad for the things that I found humorous? Is that? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, why am I feeling bad about these things? Like, obviously, there's a lot of. I'm recognizing the issues that I found entertainment in certain things. I found value in certain things that is obviously it might be wrong.
Yeah,
it's a.
But I mean, it's a growing thing. It's as we talked about, early in the episode. There's things that it's okay to not know everything and to have made mistakes in the past. I'm not going to say that it's necessarily a mistake to have laughed at these things in the past, but I think it just reflects a growing attitude or a growing maturity of just being like, yeah, I can recognize that I found it funny before, and I can recognize why it's maybe not all that funny in the scheme of things, but it doesn't change my experience. But I can still,
I think
still reconcile those two things.
I find humor in the most fucked up of things.
Yeah.
DeSantis
Absolutely.
opening everything up. What the fuck is going on, man?
Humor is a legitimate coping mechanism. I mean, it has to be. Otherwise, you need it. You need levity. You need humor in your life. You need to balance, especially in 2020, all the shit that's happening. Especially since 2016, all the things that have been happening. You need it. You got to have it, and so I think it's okay to have that, and I think it's okay to just recognize that. Oh, okay, I didn't need that. You're right. I didn't need cops and live PD in my life. I'm not going to miss them.
I'm not going to miss it. And I haven't seen it in probably 2 years or so. But I've seen a lot. And
you know what? I watched some of it in my day, but it is what it is. I had my enjoyment with it, and I recognize that it's not something that I just is necessary for me, for anyone, and I think it's probably better that we don't have it anymore.
And it can evolve. That's worth stating. The reality TV factor of cops or live PD can evolve to show a different kind of cop.
Sure.
Anyways, so that's
anyways,
that.
Yes.
Holy shit! What a news.
Another very long-winded. I think this might be our record for longest news section. I swear it was not intended as such. It was intended to be very breezy indeed. But we have. We live in a world where these issues are at the forefront, and I know for so long we've basically kind of pushed these things to the side in terms of the podcast, but we're 100+ episodes in. I don't think hopefully we're not losing too many listeners at this point, and hopefully, people are listening, I think it's acceptable to be not on the same page as us, but hopefully you can listen to us, and if you want to engage with us, I'm happy to engage with people.
And that's just it. I'm the kind of person, I have a different viewpoint than every person I interact with except Colton. Except Colton, and I have a few friends that I talk to, probably, a couple times a week or whatever, but the large majority of the people I interact with every day have a different viewpoint. And you know what? I feel confident in my ability to communicate to where I can communicate my opinion to somebody that's got a different opinion, and we can have a meaningful conversation. I actually have it with customers, and I still manage to sell them a product. So, I think the biggest disservice I think that's happened is the shying away. Like, there's this saying where you don't talk about religion, politics, or whatever to strangers. Have you ever heard that? Yeah, and that's a huge disservice. Not discussing that stuff with strangers is a huge disservice. You should be able to know how to communicate certain things in a way to where it doesn't get people pissed off to where they want to punch you, and you should be able to navigate that territory. So I kind of encourage everybody to be able to communicate what they think. It's part of the liberties we're afforded. So take advantage of it and can fucking communicate it, don't shy away from it. And right now, I don't think anybody's shying away from it. I think everybody's fucking doing it. So,
right.
But anyways, there's a respectful way to do it for sure.
Sure.
So anyways,
all right. Well, why don't we run through these last few pieces of news that we
real
do
quick?
have.
What do we got?
And I think these are largely apolitical. or non-humanitarian based, I think, overall.
Good.
Evil Dead 4 is apparently happening in a certain fashion. So Bruce Campbell, Ash Williams himself, hail to the king, baby, was doing an interview and basically talked about how there's going to be another Evil Dead, but that he will not be involved, which I find a little unfortunate. But there's a few details. Basically, it's going to be called Evil Dead Now. That's going to be the name of it. Going to be written and directed by Lee Cronin, who I'm unfamiliar with, but it has been apparently handpicked by Sam Raimi himself to write and direct the film. And, it's kind of, I don't know if it's intended to be a sequel or how exactly they're handling it. Obviously, we had a reboot/remake that was still kind of in continuity as far as we could tell. But they're basically going to do something in this universe with some new characters and new things happening. So, and obviously this is still following on the heels of Ash vs. Evil Dead, which I have yet to watch. But yeah, I don't know. Evil Dead Now. Anything that you might be interested in?
Well, it sounds exciting. I'd like to have. I don't know the director of the scariest Evil Dead. I can't remember his name.
Fede Alvarez, the most recent one.
Yeah, that'd be cool for a return. I'll tell you something else that would be. I read today that there's Japanese Evil Deads coming out.
Really?
Have you heard of those?
I don't know anything about that.
Japanese remakes of the Evil Dead.
Okay. No, I don't know anything about that.
I don't know a whole lot, but I saw it today on Kokoku, or what's that place called? Kokoku? Kokoku?
Oh, Kotaku?
Kotaku, yeah, that was.
I think so. Yeah. No, I don't know if I've ever actually said that out loud. I've never thought about it.
Anyways, they put a thing out there today that I saw. I thought that was kind of funny. Anyways,
Okay.
yeah, no, I'm all about it. Interested to see what happens. I think the title's kind of shit though. Evil Dead Now. I'm not a fan of that, but
yeah, it doesn't do anything for me either.
But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of there's a we don't know who's going to be in it. We don't know what's going to be really about, other than presumably Deadites and such. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to be waiting, but interesting that they're moving forward. I still hope that they. I just feel like they should tie it into the rest of the series. That's kind of my hope.
That's it.
But we'll see. All right, we have a couple trailers to round out things. First of which is for a long-awaited threequel, certainly one that's been in the works for a long time, a sequel to some films that were released quite a long time ago. This one is Bill and Ted Face the Music, reuniting Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter as Bill and Ted, appropriately so. And it's about a minute and a half trailer. Certainly the two look a little older, even Keanu. I think Keanu beardless. He finally looks older. You see him as John Wick, and he looks timeless with his John Wick beard. But here clean shaven, you start to see the man is in fact not a vampire, as has been long speculated. What did you think about the trailer for this?
I thought it was funny. I think it looks good, and I think it's the trailer seemed like it was on point with as far as its content. Like, yeah, you have not united the world. The world's in shambles. Like, what have you done? He's like, right.
I see what you're saying. Okay,
we need to go. Yeah. We need to go find out what the fuck we did and steal it from our future selves. And I think it sounds great. It sounds like
for me, it's like there's this kind of weird, jarring sort of thing of like seeing Bill and Ted as young Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, and then seeing old Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter. I'm just like, oh boy, I don't know if like, it's one of those things I'll get used to in, I think, 5 minutes, but it was just initially jarring. But I can tell from this that they're kind of just picking up where they left off with those first two movies. And it's fun. I'm glad that they're doing it. I'm glad that these two, who have gone on to very different careers. I mean, Alex Winter has been like a documentarian for the past several years. Yeah, and Keanu obviously has,
lit the world on fire.
Action hero John Wick and
Neo.
Duke, whatever in Toy Story 4, the
oh yeah, the fucking motorcycle,
Duke Kaboom, that's his name,
motorcycle rider.
Right, very, very diverse career paths, and it's fun to see them kind of coming back to do something that is so emblematic of their early careers. It's fun. And the trailer, it looks fun. I, for one, did not immediately recognize their prison versions as themselves until it cuts back to them, and I was just like, "Holy fuck!
Yeah. No way!"
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious.
I'll never forget Orlando, Bill and Ted.
Yeah. Halloween Horror Nights. The yearly tradition of the Bill and Ted pop culture show. Always a classic. Always a classic.
I don't know if they still do that anymore, but
I think they stopped a few years ago. They probably won't be doing it this year if I had to guess. Although, fuck it, Universal's probably open already, isn't it?
It is, actually, yeah. But they can't
shoot. What a great place to go.
But they can't shoot fireworks.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You can have thousands of people gathered, but fireworks are a no-go, obviously. So I think Bill and Ted, this is slated to release August 14th. Again, it's still kind of that iffy window for me of like, fuck, I definitely want to watch this. Although I would genuinely consider rushing to a cinema to watch Tenet. I'm not going to do the same thing for Bill and Ted 3. I can watch Bill and Ted 3 a few months later down the line.
VOD
safely
that shit
in my home. I think there's a big difference. I think in terms of like the cinematic experience. I think
that's
that
correct.
You're looking at there,
exactly.
But still, it's cool that they're making it, and I do want to watch it at some point whenever that opportunity does arise. So, last but not least, Palm Springs trailer that just dropped today when we're recording this for a Hulu original film coming in July, starring Andy Samberg and Kristen Milioti and a few others. Kind of a classic Groundhog Day type scenario wrapped around a wedding setting and some other obvious shenanigans that happen as a result of that. Certainly an out of nowhere kind of trailer / movie for me. Didn't know anything about this. And right now it's chilling at a cool 100% on Rotten Tomatoes from like 30 reviews, something like that. But still, what did you think about this one?
I thought it looked pretty fucking great. Which is high praise from me. I can't say that. Don't get me wrong. I think that dude, what's Andy Samberg? Is that his name?
Samberg, yeah.
I think he's a pretty funny dude, but I don't think he's played anything. I can't think of anything he's played in that's good. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know, but I can't. I saw Hot Rod. I thought it was shit. I don't know. I don't know. I don't identify regularly with his humor. But there were parts in this that I thought were the trailer that I thought looked great, and I thought it looked pretty fucking funny. So, yeah. So I think it looks pretty interesting.
This is shot to my like desperate list of like, oh god, I have to scrounge things together for us to cover over the next few months, and this is like, oh, well,
this doesn't look
for July 10th.
Yeah, doesn't look so bad. Looks pretty fucking great.
Yeah, it looks funny, and obviously a concept that has been done time and time again, but it still looks enjoyable in spite of that fact. So yeah, I'm curious to see how this one turns out. Definitely one I'll be checking out, and like I said, maybe we'll end up talking about it.
That bit where he shoots the bomb up in the air.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I laughed pretty good about that one.
I think the progression of this trailer just shows that like, I don't know, it's not
they just play with it, which is interesting. You don't have a lot. I mean, I think well, at least watch, review, repeat, live, die, repeat.
Live, die, repeat. Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah, Edge of Tomorrow. That was it's a very serious film. Not a lot of movies play with just living in the fact that they're reliving the day. This one kind of relishes in it, and I think that's kind of interesting. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that one.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does in fact conclude the news segment, the extended news segment for today's episode. We are now going to move along to our coverage of Da 5 Bloods, written by Danny Bilson, Paul DeMeo, Spike Lee, and Kelvin Wilmot, directed by Spike Lee, starring Delroy Lindo, Jonathan Majors, Clark Peters, Norm Lewis, Isaiah Whitlock Jr., Melanie Thierry, Jasper Pakunin, Jean Reno, and the Black Panther himself, Chadwick, a.k.a. Chaz Boseman. His name's Chadwick, for the record. Four African-American veterans battle the forces of man and nature when they return to Vietnam, seeking the remains of their fallen squad leader and the gold fortune he helped them hide. Now, we've kind of been at the outskirts of talking about this movie in terms of the war, the Vietnam War itself, in terms of the role of black soldiers in the conflict. But, honing in more specifically on the Spike Lee joint, Da 5 Bloods, the movie itself. What was your takeaway? I mean, how'd you feel about it?
All right, so my takeaway on this movie is I enjoyed the story that it told and how it told it. I think it was very long. I think it was very long-winded.
It's long. It's about 2.5. I think it's just north of 2.5 hours. It's a long movie. It's not a short movie.
It's not a
shorter
movie.
Than The Irishman, but
I think you could have told the movie shorter. I just don't know where you would trim the fat from. But I did enjoy although it made me uncomfortable, I enjoyed the inserts of historical footage. I thought that was important.
Yeah, I mean, right at the outset, it gets pretty
just
graphic
immediately,
and it certainly is shocking if you haven't seen some of the. I mean, there's a few things in there that I had seen previously, but yeah, it doesn't shy away from some pretty brutal graphic violence, especially in the beginning. So I guess, honestly, just a little bit of a trigger warning for listeners that haven't had a chance to watch it yet. There is some
incredibly graphic real footage.
There's graphic real footage there that you'll kind of see if you watch the film. And obviously there's some violence and gore in the film itself, and you can kind of separate yourself, to some extent of, it's not real, but you do see some real graphic brutality through this historical footage. So yeah, just at the outset, I think it's probably worth flagging that just for anyone that isn't aware of that and is walking in, it sets the stage, certainly.
It does. I think the coolest thing that this movie does is it does a really good job of handing off, like, it's easy to write off things that you're accustomed to seeing, like white versus black. It's easy to hand that off. But in this particular movie, he portrays the racism between foreign people in a foreign country. It's easy to say, hey, listen, this thing doesn't exist. It's easy to say this doesn't exist here, blah, 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 right? And X, Y, and Z, here's your reasons. And that's fine. But, we're going to go to war to a foreign nation, and here's people that don't speak your language, here's this and that. And he tells the same story under a different lens, I think, with the Vietnamese. And it's I think he does it really well. Does it make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I mean, you're not taking the war on the civil rights movement and stuff like that during Vietnam. We're not talking about that. We're talking about Americans versus Vietnamese. And even though the Vietnamese are being treated the same way as the blacks are, and I think it's a really interesting way to kind of shape your lens around what happens domestically. It's the same thing happening across seas, but it's also happening at home.
Yeah, I don't think it's exclusively that. There's a lot of, I think, substance within the film about the backdrop of the civil rights movement, and in terms of the context for the soldiers that are, for the Bloods that are, fighting in Vietnam. And in terms of kind of what drives them, what their foundations are in terms of their personal experiences.
Sure.
And then going out there and, there's a kind of pivotal moment, I think, in the film when they hear something through a broadcast and it kind of reshapes. They're like, well, what the fuck are we even doing here?
That's right.
Thing. What's our stake in this game? Why are we in this conflict doing what we're doing? And part of that, is stuff that we talked about earlier of just the disproportionate representation of black soldiers versus the black population in the country at the time, and kind of how that's it's interesting thing in and of itself, but it's just juxtaposed against this contentious conflict, that's unpopular stateside, and obviously the Vietnamese aren't taking too kindly to it either for obvious reasons.
Absolutely not.
It's there's a lot of things, there's a lot of moving pieces, I guess, shall we say, just within this movie.
It makes it a complicated read.
It is, and there's a lot. It's a complicated war involving a complicated subject and tackled, I think tackled appropriately through a lens that tries to examine all of these different facets. And and certain things get more play than others, but there's a lot in this movie. There's a lot of things packed into this movie, purely in terms of subject matter, and I felt like overall, at least just from my perspective, I thought that it did a pretty good job of handling all that. It's not a perfect film. It's long, perhaps overlong, and maybe somewhat overstuffed as a result of kind of Spike Lee's, I think, desire to try to capture everything that he clearly, the thing I just taking a step back, Spike Lee, again, he has a very distinct kind of perspective on racial relations, and he's taking that perspective and looking at the subject of black veterans and in terms of the trauma that is experienced through their experiences in the Vietnam War, coming back to the country and experiencing, rampant racism and pushback against their literal existence. And there's a lot that's a lot to talk about. And certainly Spike Lee, again, is a filmmaker that is not afraid to shy away from that and address it. He wants to address it.
We're going to fucking talk about it. That's what he says. Yeah.
He wants to address every aspect of that. And so there's just a lot that kind of has to get boiled down into the film as itself, and it's not, like I said, it's not a documentary, it's a film about people. It fundamentally tries to be a movie about people, about veterans who have this experience, have these experiences, have this trauma that they live through, that they continue to live through, and eventually kind of face head on by returning to Vietnam, to kind of relive and revisit that phase of their lives. There's just a lot that he has to kind of.
There's one moment,
like I said, kind of distill into it.
There's a moment where the GI are encroaching on, the I think they call them the VC, the Vietnamese soldiers, the people they're fighting against.
Viet Cong. Yeah.
Right. And so, a lot of times when you watch a war movie, you just hear the foreign chattering, right? Of the foreign soldiers. You hear the tongue of the language of the Vietnamese, right? But in this movie, you hear them talking about the same things that the soldiers talk about, the GI talk about. The people at home, the people that they're fighting for, the people, X, Y, and Z. And then moments before that, or moments after that, they mow them down. And I kind of blinked back tears a little bit. It was really fucking sad. You have these people over here that don't want to be over here, but they're over here fighting people that don't want to be fucking fighting over here either. And they're talking about their wives at home and everything else, and it's fucking super sad. It makes you question, like, why are it, and that's the question I think proposed throughout the whole film. Why? Like, why are you doing this? Why are the blacks doing this when they go home and they have civil rights leaders fighting for their rights being assassinated in the street or whatever? You know what I mean? They're over here fighting people that don't want to be fighting them either. And it's just it's a really sad fucking situation, and it's a sad moment in the whole movie. But that kind of paced it out for me once that happened. And that's where I kind of drew the parallel between the people that were fighting. They were fighting each other, they were the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how to describe that thoroughly or any way else, but it's kind of where I drew the parallel between the two caricatures, the two principal types of characters in the film. And I think that was presented throughout the film in multiple different ways. We could talk about it in spoilers, but really, really good movie. Just really long. I watched it with Sarah, and Sarah struggled with the length of the film. It's kind of slow in the way it presents its story. It's not I think it's a statement film more than it is a story film. Does that make sense? It kind of tries to make a statement more so than it tries to tell a particular story, which, if that's what you want to do with your movie, you do it. And it did it well. But to the average watcher, it makes it, I think, a more difficult viewing if that's not what they're going in for. And that's pretty much what I got to say about that movie. I think it's well acted. It's well directed. I did appreciate the difference in aspect ratio.
The shifting aspect ratio is a big part of it.
I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I liked it. It was kind of a neat filmmaking decision to separate, the flashbacks from the modern day setting, and
by aspect ratio.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was well done. It was a nice kind of way to create a change of pace, I think, throughout the film, and kind of drop you into one setting versus another. I also just purely in terms of filmmaking, while we're kind of on the subject, I appreciated that they didn't try to just de-age everyone throughout the film. It was obviously just a conscious decision to make of all of these older actors are just going to play themselves in these flashback sequences, in the war, during the war itself, without throwing on this layer of
I thought it was a storytelling
valley.
I thought it was a storytelling element.
No, I think it's that. I think it's a mix of a practical, it's a lot easier if we just fucking do this, and also just
it's the way
they remember these things. Like, they think of themselves as themselves, and then they remember Storm and Norman as Storm and Norman.
Correct.
That's the way they see things. As they perceive each other as who they see with their own eyes, in their as they're thinking about these things. But but you could have made this movie with Irishman technology that looks fucking horrendous throughout the whole thing.
You could have
made this movie by recasting everyone as younger versions, and I didn't think, I appreciated that they didn't feel the need to do that. It's too often you just kind of get lost in the continuity has to be perfect here. The continuity has to work, and it's just sometimes it's okay to just take that step back and say that, what, this is a film. It's not it's not a fucking documentary. People are going to understand this sort of thing, and not everything has to be a perfect representation of everything. And you can justify it from just a logistical standpoint, as I have, but you can also just say, from that story perspective, there's nothing really inherently wrong with it, and it's better than leaving your movie a 3-hour distracted thing about, wow, Robert De Niro looks fucking weird as shit in this scene. And, or, that's a 70-year-old man that's supposed to be a 25-year-old, but he can't move, right? That sort of thing. You didn't need any of that, and it avoids that issue entirely.
I think
I appreciated it personally.
No, yeah, and I think it makes, like I said, it makes a statement about. There's a lot to be said about post-traumatic stress.
PTSD.
Yeah, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder in this film. It makes a big statement. So to have the people in the future playing the people in the past, I think it makes it an easier transition. It makes it more applicable. It makes it easier to associate. Hey, listen, the guy that experienced this is experiencing this stress in the future. I think it makes it very easy for the viewer to associate the two characters as the same person, if that makes sense.
And it shows that experience it's not separated from them.
Correct.
That's part of who
part of
they
them.
are, and fundamentally part of them. It's ingrained into their psyche at this point. Through that trauma, that shared trauma, basically. I thought in spite of its length and you know, being kind of maybe too all-encompassing in terms of what it was trying to do, I like that Spike Lee does that. I think certain filmmakers could try to do that and fall flat on their faces. I think Spike Lee has done this enough times that he certainly has his own perspective to offer on these things, and he's going to make that known through his films. But I appreciate that, you know, when you walk into a Spike Lee film, you know you're going to get a little bit more than just a film. You know, you're going to get a little bit of history thrown into that, and you know, you're going to get some archival and historical footage spliced throughout the film to teach you a little bit of something too, you know, and be like, you know, maybe you know what I'm talking about, but maybe you don't. Here's this little thing for you to see this, to hear this, to understand this. And so I like that aspect of it, even if it does result in it being a little overstuffed and a little overlong at points. Like I appreciate that Spike Lee just kind of goes for it and doesn't care too much about how that's like, you know, it's definitively a Spike Lee joint, and it feels as such, and I like that part of it. And it's just very well made on the whole, you know, and it tells a timely story, as I mentioned, but it tells an interesting story.
One that we've never been told.
One that we've never been told, and with characters I think that are relatable, understandable, are largely sympathetic. Not all of them. But, you know...
I think even the worst of characters, hot take. We'll talk about it, but I think even the worst...
We'll talk about it more in spoilers. There's one character that's a complicated character in this film. They're all complicated. Like I said, they're all experiencing PTSD in their own ways. They're living through their trauma in different ways, but there's one character I think that gets the forefront of this film, and one that captures an almost oddity in our modern world, and something I think that clearly Spike Lee was keen to.
He called that shit out real hard.
Tried to explore, in terms of what's happening here, and so we'll talk about that in spoilers certainly. But I think it's a good cast of characters. Actors are all great. Delroy Lindo, who plays that complicated character, I think is incredible in this film, and I think everyone here is really great. I think the whole principal cast is excellent. I think they play their roles exceptionally well, and it feels like an authentic kind of. It feels like an authentic film, and the relationships between these characters feels authentic, and believable, and emotional and impactful and moving and stuff. And I thought this movie was just really good.
Let's talk about recommendations.
Yeah, I would say I'm trying to think. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot in this movie, obviously, as we've now established multiple times. But purely in terms of recommendations, our scale being very yes, totally fine, shithouse, going from best to worst for reminder for folks. I guess I'm probably going to say very yes. It's not a perfect film, but I think that it handles a lot of themes and ideas and story points that I haven't been personally exposed to in a while, and I think Spike Lee handles them pretty deftly overall, even if I have grievances with certain things. You know, there's that one character who I think I have some reservations about kind of how they went about handling that character, but I think it was a very well realized character, and one that is understandable, and I think that all these characters are kind of that. You know, they're again very well realized, and the story feels impactful and timely. I just think, I think it's an important film overall. You know, I think it's
it's important.
I think it's a good film to watch. I think it's, you know, it's a little tonally all over the place here and there. But you know, I think that's just Spike Lee's kind of way of making things, as you know, shifting from hyper violence at some times to monologuing at the screen, you know, almost breaking the fourth wall for a little bit, and things of those nature. Like, you know, it's a very interesting film in terms of the filmmaking process, but I think it's more than that. Obviously, it's about the story, it's about these people, it's about the history of this, and about the history of, you know, the actual real life American history of this, and how that was true in the 60s and 70s, and how that is still true today, and how we should be looking at that today. So there's a lot into it, and there's a lot in this film. There's a lot that I cannot express in words, I guess. It's hard for me to kind of...
Well, but maybe by communicating like between each other, maybe we'll be able to get some sort of expression on a lot of the things that have happened in the movie, because there's a lot to unpack for sure. I think that this movie is a very yes. I don't think. With that being said, I think that it might be a difficult watch for a lot of people just because it is a long movie, and the way that the narrative is told. I think it might be something that's just different and kind of, like I said, difficult to unwind and unpack. But I don't think that makes it less important. I think it's a very important movie. Anytime you can walk away with a different perspective on a major historical event or a group of people or anything, I think it's worth watching. I mean, it makes you a better person. And I think that's why we have film. I think that's why we have media. I think that's why we have art in general, is to expand the human consciousness. As gooberish as that might sound, I think that's the whole point. You know what I mean? Like if you can take one person's perspective and he can tell a story, even though it might be a little long, even though it might be tonally all over the place, or it might be just a little bit different. It's a perspective that we weren't taught in school. It's a perspective that is, if you look it up, it was very real. And if that's the case, if it's a real experience, and it's an experience that a lot of people don't have, it's an experience worth knowing. It's an experience worth feeling, So, I think it's a very important movie to watch. Just like The Klansman, I think Black Klansman is incredible. I think that's an incredible movie to bring in another Spike Lee movie. But this movie in particular, I would say it's a very yes. I think it's a very important movie to watch. Although I think it might be a difficult movie to watch.
Yeah, I think it's challenging in multiple ways. Certainly, just duration is one of those, and I think there are again moments of violence, both real and depicted, that are going to be hard to watch. I think for some viewers, understandably so. So I kind of get that. I also, just before we move on to spoilers, just something that I was thinking about. Great score. Good use of Marvin Gaye overall in this film.
Yeah, it was good.
Very good. All right. Shall we move on to spoilers?
We'll talk about it.
All right. Full spoilers for To Five Bloods. Well, it's a lot in this movie. Maybe we should start with Paul. The complicated character I think we've kind of talked about, and I think we can probably get into in a little bit more substance here. The part of the 8% of the black men, I think, that voted for Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election, as he's depicted here, obviously a fictional character, but this odd kind of archetype of a black veteran who seemingly decides to vote against his own self-interests by voting for this man. And it's kind of his movie in a way. I think certainly of the Bloods, he's the one that gets the most prominence. He gets the most, I think, dialogue and screen time and stuff like that. And it's probably the best performance in this film overall. But there's a lot that's there that, I don't know, it's interesting and uncomfortable in ways, and just challenging in other ways. It's just kind of this I don't know, from the outside looking in, just kind of this perplexing kind of why, how, just kind of question. And obviously, and I've read about this character since watching the film. And Delroy Lindo, who played him, basically was apprehensive about taking this role in the first place. He's just like, I don't think I feel comfortable playing this MAGA hat wearing Trump loving character, who doesn't represent anything that I stand for as as a person, I'm not sure that it's hard. It's hard for me to kind of like understand it. And he basically said that it took him 2 or 3 times through the script to kind of realize that this is a character that has gotten fucked over so many times that his only response to that is blindly kind of turning to someone who he thinks represents some sort of change. Whether or not that's, obviously actually something that was going to happen has not happened so far. It's an interesting character to basically center this movie around in a way. Not fully center this movie around, but to feature in such prominence. Because it begs the question of, well, did we need that? Do we need this person kind of put up on this pedestal, or do we need to justify this sort of thing? And I guess just for my 2 cents, I kind of look at it as I honestly think Spike Lee is fascinated by this person, this mythical black man who votes for Trump, of just a literal question of what sequence of events in your life lead you to this point.
I think that
in America.
The thing I took from it is it's easy to maybe I'm talking out of place. You can tell me if I'm talking out of place or not. But what I got from it is where the other Bloods were, they were more willing to accept the Vietnamese than he was. He was reflective of the discriminatory nature that he received. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to say that although this movie, I think, goes to some lengths to show the effect that the PTSD has on Paul, and it goes to some lengths to show that he's been given a raw deal, as the screenwriter kind of said. He's been given a raw deal on so many levels. I think it's also fair to point out that Paul is just a fucking asshole.
Paul's a dick, for sure.
He is also himself racist in many ways towards the Vietnamese, towards others, and so there are layers to this character, in the sense that he is not supporting Trump and voting for Trump just because life's just been a sequence of bad events for him that have led him down this path. No, it's a combination of he's just not a great person to begin with, in the sense that
he's been manipulated by the things he was fed. I think from the get-go, when he was fighting the Viet Cong, he was real quick to just, like you say, he's an asshole. You know what I mean? He's real quick. Hey, I just want to kill white people. I think personality-wise, he's just an asshole, and his experiences have magnified the impact of that to transform him, definitively from just being, someone that's, not fun to hang out with or not fun to get along with, and it turned him into kind of, this very morphed version of his own already kind of twisted self, and so it's a complicated character, because I think this film does a little bit try to again make you empathize with him and understand his perspective. And again, I think a lot of that is literally just Spike Lee trying to figure out what's driving this person that's seemingly voting against their self-interests for some reason. And the screenwriter kind of points it out as, he refuses to get counseling, he pushes people away, and he blames others for his problems. I think that is like the prototypical Trump supporter. And damn,
I think in a nutshell,
that's what that guy does. Yeah,
and I think it kind of makes sense, and I think it kind of helps lend some perspective, I think, to why it is that this guy is such a driving force in this movie. I think fundamentally, I don't have an issue with the depiction. I think it's exceptionally well kind of realized through Delroy Lindo's performance. I guess where I take a little bit of flack with it, just from my limited perspective, for whatever that's worth, kind of feel like the movie doesn't really do enough to denounce kind of how dangerous that is. Like, it feels like the intent, just from looking at kind of talks with Lindo and the screenwriter and Spike Lee, is about, like, you know, showing how it's hypocritical for him to kind of have this stance and short-sighted and stuff like that. But I almost feel like the movie doesn't really make him
a more of a sympathetic person by the end of it.
It almost tries to make you, and it's not that you have to completely villainize him. I don't think you need to make him a two-dimensional cardboard cutout villain or anything like that. I think it's interesting to try to get in the mindset of like how, like, I don't know, I almost feel like I'm being too, I don't know, I guess being too presumptuous and just saying, like, how do you get twisted to that point, you know, personally speaking. And it's not to say that you're wrong or you're right, but I think that there's certainly something that you could look at from the outside looking in and think, well, that is kind of antithetical to, like, someone that grew up through the civil rights movement to turn around and vote for someone that kind of doesn't
represent anything.
Same ideals.
He's got a total misconception.
Yeah, and so I think that it's an interesting kind of examination of that character, but I just kind of wish that it went to a little bit more lengths to just kind of point out.
See, I gathered from it was...
you know, it leaves it to you to draw conclusions on your own, and my conclusion is this guy's an asshole, and I think that the trauma just, again, exacerbated that aspect of his personality to the point where he's unhinged, and you shouldn't be giving this guy a gun, for fuck's sake.
I think it's easy to say that he had misgivings in his life, and he blamed it on the minority. He blamed it on the person that you know what I mean? He had an accident.
He blames it on others. It's not my fault.
Exactly. And I think that's just it. I think that's exactly the. I mean, I don't know if it's.
And to be fair, not. There's a lot of things that probably went wrong for this person, for the people that did, you know, vote for Trump. That, you know, it wasn't their fault. It's absolutely true. I mean, you know, there's the point in this where, like,
and even, you know, he has this resentment toward
his son.
I think, like, you know, one of the first things he says is when you're introduced to the character, he talks about the people building the wall. Mm-hmm. Build the wall, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? He's talking about building the wall. And then the further you get into it, you know, he doesn't want to buy the chicken because he fought against these people. And, you know, I feel like he dresses, this is going to sound, I don't know, you can cut this part out if it gets too weird. He wears the Magna hat. He wears a vest. He's voting for Trump, and he's more racist than any other person in the movie. More racist than any other person in the movie. I feel like he represents the white person in the movie. That's what I feel like. Anyways, and that might be that might be a weird kind of stance in that. But I don't know. I just feel like he takes all the misgivings that he's given and he blames it on the minority, and that's his wife died. He blames it on his son. You know, he throughout the movie that's a critical point. He isolates his son. He makes his son feel like shit and everything else. It's pretty shitty. It's real bad. And throughout the movie, he hates the Vietnamese, even though he did his fair share of things to them. You know what I mean? It's I don't know. It's a very complicated character. But he's also the one most tortured. He harbors the most guilt for killing. He accidentally kills the person he idolizes the most. You know, which I think there's probably a statement there that I don't quite understand. But he harbors the most guilt. He's the one that killed Norman, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So I don't fully understand the character, but I do, like I said, that's what I gathered from him. He's the one that, you know, for a movie that's, for a Spike Lee movie, a movie that's stapled in racial relations and the mistreatment of the black community, I think that he represents that Paul represents I don't know, just like you say, a portion of the community that wants to reallocate the blame of misgivings and things to a different minority. He wants to just deflect. I think that's what it is. Deflection.
And I think there's aspects of that. I think there's also something that I don't have a lot of knowledge on, but I know is out there, is just kind of an internalized like self hatred, in the sense that
right,
of in the sense that, you know, if I wasn't black, then I wouldn't be in this position, or if I wasn't a person of color, I wouldn't be in this position. And so you kind of internalize that sort of hatred, and you resent yourself for that, and you resent the kind of greater implications of that.
That's right.
And it's really heavy. I mean, it's something that happens, and you can't blame the individual for that sort of perspective. It's just it's a result of
the environment,
the culture in the world, and the environment pushing them in that direction, instead of accepting people and recognizing people for who they are. It helps people internalize them, internalize those feelings, and so I think it's a combination of that. I think it's a combination of, well, I'm going to redirect some of that anger towards other people, you know, and literally I have this experience of, you know, being in this conflict with the foreign enemy, and so I can easily just you know, dehumanize these people and
the way
and
I
say,
have been
dehumanized, right? And just redirect that, and also something else is, and this is just me looking at kind of outside sources to kind of fill in the gaps of like, what is this? What's going on here? Delroy Lindo is saying that he identifies with being a forgotten man. And he says that's the crux of Paul's attachment to voting for Trump, is that, you know, he feels like this outsider is coming in and spouting this rhetoric about how, you know, these people don't give a shit about you, but I do, you know, and saying that, like, yeah, no one gives a shit about me. You know,
yeah.
So fuck it. What do I have to lose by putting my faith in someone that says they're gonna work for me? Like, these people haven't fucking done shit my entire life, and here's this person that's coming along that, you know, think that says that they can't. You know, and obviously that's
representation.
I would argue that's a little misguided, but
yeah.
But, you know, at the same time, and he points out to kind of your point of, you know, him being kind of the quote unquote white man, I guess. He says that's a little bit different in the sense that for certain, I think for not all white people, but certainly a sizable contingent for them, it's about white dominance, white supremacy, and blaming the people of color for the problems, and you know, so there's obviously kind of that aspect and that parallel there to some extent, but it's a little bit different. I think it's more complicated than that for Paul, for these people that were, you know.
No, the representation thing, though, I think you're definitely right about that. That kind of gave me chills when you talked about that, where it talks about how I haven't had representation. This person represents the unrepresented. And just, you know, more broadly, I think that appealed to a sizable demographic of people. Not even white or black; it transcended white or black.
Right. I think it goes beyond that, and you know, 8% of black men clearly points to the fact that it didn't hit home with the majority of people, but I think that certain other parts of the populace it did hit home. It did hit home for them in a big way, and you know, here we are, obviously. So yeah, I don't claim to obviously be the end all be all source of information and expertise on this particular character, but it's just an interesting
either is Spike Lee.
Look.
I think that's important to say too.
Sure.
This is one man's interpretation of a broader thing, you know, and so, but like I said, it does lend perspective to see these characters, and you know, I don't know, try to think about them, you know, so it's worth.
Yeah, and I appreciate the attempt to engage with it.
Right.
I think, you know, I think, as I said before, you know, I guess it does beg the question of, do we need this? And the answer maybe is no, in terms of, do we need this particular version of this character to be MAGA hat wearing, and stuff like that. And maybe not necessarily. But I don't think that it means that you shouldn't have to do it. And I guess if anyone is going to tackle that head on, I think Spike Lee's probably a fairly appropriate person to be able to try to look at that and try to figure out, well, what the fuck's happening here. I don't know. I find it interesting, again, just from an outside perspective of just thinking, what's the thought process here? How can I recognize this? How can I reconcile this? And I don't know that this is going to fundamentally change anyone's mind about, if the Paul parallel in real life watches this and sees this movie, I don't think they're going to think, oh shit, I was an idiot 3.5 years ago because of this movie. Maybe they've felt that way because of 3.5 years of living their life and seeing how things have played out. Maybe that changes their perspective on things. Maybe not. This movie, I don't think, is going to fundamentally move the needle in any sort of significant direction on what this character is and who these people are and stuff like that. But I think it's still at least kind of interesting to look at it as, hey, this is a weird phenomenon, when you boil it down to kind of that weird sort of phrasing and kind of see well, what the fuck happened? Like, what is this? Like, what's the deal?
And like I said, I think the saddest part of this movie for me, there's a lot of sad moments in this movie, but the saddest moment for me was when, do you know what part I was talking about earlier? When he was talking about how the Vietnamese soldier found a poem from his girlfriend.
Yes, it was like the soldiers talking to each other, and then they get ambushed upon by the Bloods.
And the way that they made it was super poetic because they kind of delayed it. They had a sequence of interaction that wasn't dubbed, and then they had the soldiers pulling up on them. You know what I mean? And then they introduced the text, which was, it just added a whole different layer to the experience. You know what I mean? Like, not only you're not gonna see just the soldiers, firing on a foreign force. They're, you know what I mean? You're gonna see what the other side's like, which is just it. You know what I mean? And that shit was sad. And then after that, they had the lady from the radio talking about how Martin Luther King had been assassinated.
Yeah, that was the moment. I think I don't remember exactly what the context was, but that was something I was talking about, non-spoilers, of like, that was kind of a moment that really, really hit home for me of, it's the moment for, I think, the Bloods where they're just like, well, what the fuck are we even doing here? Like, and I think it's a rightful kind of reaction of just being like,
they hear it from a foreign force versus their own people.
Yeah, and obviously it's propagandistic to basically say, hey, what are you fighting for, really?
Yeah,
but like, and regardless of the mechanism of the message being delivered, I think it does kind of, if you're in that position, if you're one of the Bloods in this position, and you think, wait, we're fighting this war for people that don't give a fuck about us and who think we're lesser than, like, fuck them,
yeah.
And Norman's kind of the only one that was just kind of just like, hey, this, we're bigger than this, there's more that we can do, and there's other things that we can do, and we can, like, it's we don't need to do this right now. Like, there's a better way to do this without just immediately just saying, yeah, fuck everything kind of thing. But it's a justified response, certainly, of just just frustration and years of frustration, and even now, just,
it's still apparent. It's still present.
It's still ever present, certainly. Yeah. So, which makes this film timely in the sense that, yeah, it's dealing with Vietnam vets and that, but it's just dealing with just plain old racism in America. Like, that shit hasn't gone away.
And it talks, one thing I like about this movie that, I don't know if it's been present in other Spike Lee movies, but let's talk about a fucking veteran. Yes, you have black veterans. They have PTSD, they have problems and this and that. We're just going to give them fucking pills.
Yeah. Right?
And here they are, just, it's present in this movie. There was a small, but there was a statement there about that. Hey, we'll give them Oxycontins, and here they are grappling with that. What do they gather? What do they get, really? Even the most rich and who everyone thinks is the most they think he's gathering the most, he's benefited the most from everything. He's broke. And then he walks back on a fucking landmine. Which it's kind of shitty. It might be kind of shitty, but he backed up on the landmine. I couldn't help but just
it was a jarring moment.
It was a Tropic Thunder kind of moment.
It was a very quick shift in tone.
Yeah, I couldn't help but I'm like, what the goddamn.
I mean, I think that's like an appropriate, like, holy shit, like definitely kind of, because the way it's played, it's not like it's not built to with like this swell of, like, there's a lot of, I mean, I think this movie is pretty cavalier in terms of how it approaches the violence. Obviously the flashback sequences are pretty, just machine guns firing left and right, blood spurts and blah, blah, blah. But then, like for the first half of this movie, it's pretty separated, like it's just like a, group of, old, squad mates, old pals, old veterans, just hanging out and kind of shooting the shit and, giving each other a hard time here and there, and going on this kind of quest to find this gold and recover the, Storm of Norman's remains. But it's a pretty kind of, the tone doesn't really descend into violence or anything like that, and it's really just when that landmine thing kicks off. And I will say, as soon as they introduced a character that's like, we look at landmines in the country and try to find them and defuse them. And I'm like, a landmine's going off in this fucking movie at some point. And it turns out several did. I knew it was coming, but certainly when that particular moment of Melvin. Not Melvin, Norm. No, Norm Lewis is the actor. Damn it, Eddie. When Eddie kind of, he's walking backwards, giving his speech, and then just,
yeah,
it was just like oh, motherfucker, holy shit, and it just marks like a really distinct shift in tone for this film. I think overall, from just kind of being this like, hey, we're going to find some gold and, and get back and live our lives, and just, I don't know, it really, it unravels from that point in a way that I didn't see coming. I guess, I don't know, sorry if I took that into a completely kind of different direction than where you were heading, but.
No, you took it right where I was going.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, I guess as a few kind of thoughts that I have just generally about the film. I liked the concept of just this idea of Storm and Norman being like, hey, we've got this gold, and you know what? Like, fuck it, let's bury it and find
this
it
is
later
for
in
our
life
people.
as like as reparations for our people. We were fucking brought to this, well, not to this country, but to America, in chains, and the chains might not physically be there, but for all intents and purposes, they're still there, and so fuck it, like, let's make this right by taking this for ourselves and, contributing to our people and our cause. And I liked that idea, and even just the literal setup of them just like reuniting and going back for the gold. Like it just felt like
a cool story
concept for a movie. It was a good story, certainly, and it just definitely took a turn towards the middle. They find the gold and the remains like an hour into the movie, and I'm like, there's an hour and a half left. What the fuck's left in this movie, kind of thing. So it takes that turn. But
I also liked I like the story between Paul and his son. I thought that was an interesting story. There's a bunch of little individual stories between what's his name? He has the long hair. He gets shot in the shoulder. Otis and
his
not his wife, his
love interest,
from the Vietnam
time,
right?
certainly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting story. I also appreciated Paul's son. Thought his character was very interesting. Yeah. Represents a totally different generation of.
Right. Yeah. You have these literal vets, and then you have this guy who's half their age and has grown up in a very different
can still identify.
Time. Sure. Certainly has experienced his own share of racism in the country, but it's certainly a different perspective than a Vietnam War vet.
Right. And that's apparent between the French and him at the bar. Or the guy that runs over the landmine. Fucking dick.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's a real well-rounded story with a lot of really complex characters. I think it's, I don't know. I think it's thought-evoking, which I think is
for sure.
I think that's the.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's
I don't
the
think
biggest
we're
thing.
covering half of this film.
No. I think that every character has a story that's worth thinking about, because I think that the stories are parallels to real people. As melodramatic as that may sound, I don't think it's a stretch. I think any person in this movie you can identify with, or you can.
I think to an extent they're all pretty likable characters, or at least compelling in their own sort of way. I think Paul's kind of the one exception where he's way out. He's way the fuck out a loose cannon.
But you see the experiences that he has, that it's not too far to put out there that, yeah, be pretty fucked up if I experience the same things,
Yeah.
And I think that's what the interesting thing about the movie is it puts you in every character's situation. Even the guy that jumped on the grenade, fuck you, if that happens, I'm not jumping on that grenade, and he's put in the situation, jumps on the grenade.
Yeah.
And that one particular part hit. I don't know. I feel like a lot of shit fucking hits hard lately. I just fucking cry over everything. I don't know if my hormones are changing or what, but I cry over fucking everything. This movie had me teary-eyed a little bit. I don't know what the fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked. I think I just wish it seemed like, because we had so much time with Paul, it kind of felt like the deaths of the other characters almost felt a little glossed over in some ways. Like, I feel like when Eddie dies, with the landmine, it's a pretty quick, well, that was fucked, and then they just kind of move on. And I kind of felt like the movie went to more lengths. I mean, Paul still dies in a pretty unceremonious fashion, getting shot 1,000 times. And I guess I felt like there was so much time spent with that character, and then it didn't really go out of its way to deal with the repercussions of any of the deaths of the other characters in a huge, meaningful way. I don't mind, Melvin just having this instinctual decision to say, oh shit, grenade, and just jump on it and sacrifice himself. I don't think you need a big swell in the score and a slow motion shot of him diving to make that moment more impactful. But it just doesn't seem like the characters addressed that, other than just being like, oh, okay. And I think, that happens pretty close to the end anyway, so it kind of jumps regardless. But I just kind of felt like they could have done a little bit more to flesh out those characters too. And maybe it turns it into a 3-hour movie, but maybe you just need to redirect some of the attention to make that a little bit more equitable between the characters. But the movie, Spike Lee and company made the film I'm sure the way that they wanted to make their film, and so I think for what it was, I think it's an impressive, certainly work of filmmaking, work of art, and one that raises a lot of conversations. And I know we've had a couple of them, but there's certainly a lot that could be mined from this film, certainly beyond, I think, what we've had a chance to talk about. But in the interest of time, I guess I'll say, do you have any other final thoughts on To Five Bloods?
No other thoughts, dude. We can get into what we've been doing lately.
All right, let's do that. What have you been up to lately?
Nothing. So I'm gonna put some. So I've been working with the wood lately. There's no secret.
Yep, it's not a secret. We know about it. What's the latest on that front?
The latest project is I have a foyer that, walking up to the front door, there's an exterior light and an exterior foyer to the front door, and there's an area about, I don't know, probably about 15 foot up in the air where my exterior light is. And I'm gonna put wood. I'm gonna stain and put tongue and groove wood boards up there, up at the top, way up there, and nail gun them up into the ceiling. And it's gonna look. You can look up like wood in the foyer ceiling kind of pictures, and that's what it's gonna be. It's gonna be like, I don't know, just boards versus like just drywall ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm communicating that correctly, but that's what it's gonna be. It's gonna be fancy.
Okay.
And I recently got. So I spent about 4 hours. My dad gave me these tongue and groove boards. They're like I don't know. They're like this big, like 4 inches wide by like 1 inch thick tongue and groove boards, and they're all been stained, right? And anyways, I don't like the stain on the board, so I'm removing the stain. Anyways, I took about a bunch of these boards. They're like 16 foot. I cut them down to size, and I spent about 4 hours sanding 3 boards. I have about 11, 12 boards that I have to sand. 4 hours standing 3 boards. It was a pain in the ass. It was terrible. Anyway, so I found this guy online. There was this dude. I fell asleep. I took a nap after I sanded the boards. And I woke up, and this guy was sanding a hand planer for super cheap. $30. I said, oh, shit, I'm going to buy that. And there's a sander. A sander uses sandpaper. It just scrapes the surface, and it's an orbital, so it just kind of rubs the surface until it gets rid of it, right? The heavier the grit, the more material it takes off. But it's still infinitely slower than something actually cutting through the wood. A planer cuts the wood at a particular depth, and it makes it smooth. So the hand planer it's gonna take hours out of my workload from removing the stain. So that's what's cool about it. Anyways, I went to this dude's house, and I picked up probably $700 or $800 worth of tools.
Damn.
For $110.
Ooh, double damn.
So I have all sorts of fucking tools now in the garage. I've got everything I need to pretty much make cabinetry and like I don't know. I can make all sorts of stuff. I'm not very capable because I haven't actually created a lot of things, but I have enough tools now for probably $300. I think is what I have invested. $350, maybe $400 at most, in actual stuff, because I bought it all secondhand. But I could probably like go into fucking business and make shit, which I probably won't do, because I'm not very good at it, because I haven't done a lot of it. But I don't know. It's cool to just know that shit's out there. Other than that. I've watched, did I talk about watching The Outer Banks?
Yeah, I think you'd finished it last episode.
Okay, I have indeed finished it. We've been watching a game show called The Wall. Have you ever heard of The Wall?
Is that the one with LeBron?
Yeah, LeBron James is a executive producer on The Wall.
Okay. Who's the host of it?
The guy from the Walking Dead talk show.
Is it Chris Hardwick? I thought it might have been.
Yes, Chris Hardwick. Okay. That's it. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sarah and I have been watching a good deal amount of that. It's pretty cool.
Pretty cool. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Cool. Pretty cool. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still a Jeopardy fan. Jeopardy's like the be all.
Jeopardy's classic, man. You can't beat fucking Jeopardy.
You can't beat it. But I've been watching The Wall. It's pretty good. And I think that's really about it. I haven't really been into a whole lot else besides... Oh, I did play a little bit of Sekiro.
Nice. I didn't know you had that.
I did not have that. I don't have that. I played it over at Dan's house.
Okay. So just a little dropping in on it and checking it out?
Yeah, he had it on his computer. He started a new profile, and I played a little bit of it, and felt pretty fucking good to play a video game. I don't play a lot of video games anymore. And that video game does feel like it would scratch a particular itch. But I haven't played much of it anytime else, so I don't know if I'll ever be able to scratch that itch, because that game seems pretty hard. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's
kind of that from software, Dark Souls, right. Yeah. Kind of vein. Yeah.
Fucking PS5 is coming out, dude.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, that's the first thing on my list is fucking the full on PlayStation 5 reveal. I think at the top. What are your thoughts on the design? Is it?
I don't know. I kind of don't like
feeling it.
No, I kind of think it looks like shit.
I think it's gonna age poorly. I don't mind it. The two-tone is. I don't know if I love that aspect of it. I think it looks better than the new Xbox, which just looks like a weird subwoofer. So I'm not a fan of that design.
Which it does, yeah.
But people are like, well, this just looks like a router. And I'm like, yeah, kind of does.
You're not wrong.
Yeah. So yeah, design's a little wonky. I think it's fine. It doesn't bother me, I guess I'll say. A little curious about price. Haven't heard anything on that front yet. But
I think it's like $700.
They haven't announced it officially. I'm expecting,
they haven't? Okay.
No, I'm expecting both next-gen consoles to be 500-ish range minimally.
That seems fair, you know?
I think so. I think you can't hit 600 because of the memes, the PS3 memes. Like, Sony did that with the PS3, and it was a fucking disaster for them, and I just don't think they can replicate that.
No.
Again. Even though I think these things are behemoths in terms of hardware, like it's...
I think I'm buying a PS5, though, with the Blu-ray player and not buying an Xbox.
Yeah, I mean, I have an Xbox that already has the 4K player in it. So I don't really need it for the 4K aspect particularly. The thing with Microsoft stuff is basically their whole model is that everything is cross-compatible between the old generation with PC and everything. And I'm like, well, I don't need the new thing then, really. Whereas at least with PlayStation, I think there's a bevy of exclusives and stuff. They're always going to be that.
Always.
That Last of Us 3 or Uncharted 5 type thing or Horizon 2, type thing of being like, well, maybe you can play that on a PC in a couple of years, but it's not, these things are going to be kind of console forward, at least at the outset. And, there's always just a matter of convenience. I'm at the point with my PC where it's several years behind the curve and it's easier for me. It's certainly more cost efficient for me to just buy a $500 console than it would be to try to get my PC up and back to being good for most modern specs moving forward. But
it's like we're kids again.
It runs things well enough, but it would cost me at least $1,000 to get my PC into a point where I would be like, I'm good for a few years. There's a lot of things I would need. So the console.
I don't know if a couple years even lasts anymore. Does it?
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
We're so outside of it. We're like old men now.
Yeah. But yeah, the PS5 announcement, or I guess the future of gaming thing. Did you watch it? Did you just kind of look at some of the recap stuff from it? I guess you probably would.
I saw that they were making a fucking Rogue Squadron multiplayer kind of thing, which I don't know about the multiplayer aspect. It kind of makes me sick to my stomach. But that trailer looked good.
There will be a single player aspect to it, and from my understanding, is that the whole game will be playable in VR, which excites me.
No way.
Yeah, so that's pretty sweet. So I'm
That's ridiculous. I will buy the PS5. I will buy whatever I need.
That's a PS4 and PSVR and PC VR kind of game one there. That's not even a PS5 game. So
what? Do what now?
That game comes out in like 4 months. The Star Wars one you're talking about.
Does it really?
Yeah, for current consoles. So yeah. So
is the PSVR compatible with the PS5?
Yes, they've said that it will be.
And it just escalates it?
I don't know how that's going to work. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure because honestly, the PS4 Pro struggles with some aspects of VR, so I think the PS5 is going to be, more equipped to handle some of the VR fidelity.
You already have a PSVR.
I do indeed. Don't use it as often as I should, but when Star Wars Squadrons rolls around, you bet your ass.
I will be using
I'm going to be piloting a fucking X-Wing or an A-Wing or a TIE Interceptor.
We could have a squadron, dude. We could be flying around in a squadron.
Could do it. Yeah, just other things. The PS5 event, though. I mean,
what else we got?
Some cool announcement there. The Spider-Man Miles Morales spinoff.
Oh my goodness, that shit looks so good.
It looks awesome.
Even Jack and Dexter.
What's that?
Jack and Dexter? Not Jack and Dexter, but
Ratchet and Clank. The Ratchet and Clank.
Yes,
that looks incredible. Just like visually, it looks incredible. What else is kind of the there's a few in there that were kind of like, okay, fine. I think maybe the 3 that really caught my eye, the Demon's Souls remake is cool.
Fuck,
that's
yeah,
like the original From Software kind of one. And I have Demon Souls, the PS3 game, haven't played it, and almost tempted to just go back and play it, because I'm sure this is going to be pretty different because it's a full-blown remake and not just a remaster. Looks cool. The new Resident Evil looked fucking awesome.
Looks nuts. Yes.
And I'm sure that's probably going to be like Resident Evil 7, fully playable in VR as well, which is awesome. And then Horizon 2 was kind of the last one that was kind of like the big, I think, reveal for them, and looks great. I haven't played the first one, but it definitely... The first one came out like a week or two right after Breath of the Wild did, and so Breath of the Wild took up hours of my time, and I bought Horizon and then just didn't get a chance to play it. But that's definitely one I want to go back to. So, yeah, I'm excited for the PS5. It's supposed to come out this holiday season.
I'll be all over on a holiday season for sure.
I think I'm going to be all over it myself. Yeah, I'm going to, I'll have to scrounge together some money for it, certainly, but I think I'm going to be all over it. I'm pretty excited, and it's not to say that I wouldn't get enjoyment out of an Xbox, but I just don't have an imminent need for it with just how their model is set up. And I think the PS5 is going to cover my bases. And I think certainly between the PS5 and the Switch, those are capturing kind of the two parts of the market. I think the Xbox and PlayStation are kind of just the same part of the market. And so it's just kind of choose what you want. And I have way more PS4 games than I do Xbox games. It's just whatever reason. I just
Xbox just isn't there, man.
Honestly, part of it I think is the Xbox user interface is just dog shit, and I find it hard to just navigate the fucking Xbox. I just don't enjoy it. I think the PS4 is just intuitive to use.
And the exclusives just aren't there.
Yeah, and the ones that are there, I can just
play on
my computer.
Yeah,
there's no incentive for me to just drop $1,000 on both consoles. I'm just like, I'll just pick one, and then when they put out an Xbox that is revised in a few years for half the price, then that's probably one I'll jump. I mean, that's what I did with the Xbox. Is I went in on PS4 day one. I've since upgraded to a Pro, but I didn't get in on the Xbox One until probably a couple of years in, until I got a good deal with a bundle, and then I upgraded that for Xbox One X. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I know this is a film and television podcast, so but I was excited about the PlayStation 5. It was very cool.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot of other things I've been up to super recently. I watched Rogue One in 4K on Disney Plus, which was excellent. The Vader sequence is superb. I like when he puts the guy up on the ceiling and then he cuts him in half as he walks past.
It's fucking badass
as shit.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it was cool just seeing that movie in 4K. I guess I kind of forgot. Like, it's just a good fucking movie, man. Like it seems like it came out so long ago, and it really hasn't in the scheme of things. But there's been a lot of Star Wars content since then, and I kind of forgot that was like our first taste of like non-Skywalker related Star Wars, and how cool that concept could be. And I feel like the Mandalorian's kind of picked up the mantle on that front, since The Rise of Skywalker kind of fumbled the actual main plot thread a little bit. A lot of it, depending on your perspective. But yeah, it was good. So I was happy to revisit Rogue One. Greatly enjoyed it. I think I'll watch Solo at some point, because that'll be kind of the last one that I haven't. Actually, I'll rewatch The Rise of Skywalker at some point too, to be honest. Give it a fair shake, since it's been a few months since it came out in theaters. But yeah, still, Star Wars, man. Star Wars is some good shit. Love me some Star Wars. I also watched The Devil Wears Prada. That classic fashion film. Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway. Anna's been trying to watch it. She bought it on Amazon for like $5 digitally, like in March, and we haven't watched it. And we finally watched it, start to finish. And
so good, right?
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Not gonna lie. It's a fun film. It's enjoyable. Yeah, I liked it.
Well.
And then other than that, I've been continuing through The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which I talked about on our last episode. A timely book to read now, dealing with a police killing of an unarmed black man at a traffic stop, and the fallout from that on the community and friends and family and stuff. So very timely, touching, heartbreaking, well written. Highly recommended Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. And that's it for me. as of now. I think it's time for us to wrap this episode up.
Go to bed. It's time to go to bed.
Time to go to bed, Andrew says. Well, thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please spread the word. On Patreon, you can access our latest bonus episode. $2 a month is what we ask of our Patreon supporters to gain access to that, as well as early access to all of our regular episodes. So if you want to listen to our COVID-19 pandemic special with Dr. Enrique Jamie, head to patreon.com/watchreviewrepeat or head to our website, watchreviewrepeat.com, and click the premium tab up in the top left, and that'll get you where you need to go. 6 films that we talked about, basically touching on viruses generally. Seventh Seal, 12 Monkeys, 28 Days Later, The Host, 28 Weeks Later, and Contagion. Check it out. We are planning on doing a kind of about face and talking about hopefully some very positive and heartwarming films to watch for our next bonus episode that we're planning for early July. It'll be the next phase of our Studio Ghibli coverage, which all the Studio Ghibli movies are up on HBO Max to watch for anyone that has made it this far in the episode and is still listening. So maybe follow along there. We're going to be watching we're going to be watching and talking about all the films that were released in the 1990s. So there's 7 films in that span that we're going to look at and talk about. So that's what's going on the Patreon front. Again, our website's watchreviewrepeat.com. If you need links to anything, email, social media accounts, etc. You can follow us on Twitter. We are at WRRPod. You can search Watch Review Repeat on Facebook, find us that way, get in contact with us that way. If you have seen anything, done anything, played anything you want to talk about, send us questions, comments, suggestions, watchreviewrepeat@gmail.com. I did get a slight listener's corner.
No way. Did you really?
Yeah, from one Bruce Brown.
Oh, okay.
Who chimed in on The Gentleman, Guy Ritchie's latest, which I don't think either of us ended up seeing.
No.
Saying it was very good. Thought it was going to suck, but it was well worth watching. So there you go. I think he retboxed it. And he also chimed in about our werewolf conversation, saying American Werewolf in London is a classic, which I agree.
Let's watch it. Let's do a bonus episode on that.
Werewolf episode. All right, we'll tee up a werewolf bonus episode at some point. But yes, I agree. It is a classic, but it's not a straight horror film.
We'll talk about
that was part of the conversation
in the bonus
that we had,
episode,
and a part of a conversation we may have in the future. Intro and outro track, Becanalith by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. We have no fucking clue what we're doing for our next episode, to be honest. Haven't talked about it. I've looked at things that are coming out. There's that shitty-looking Will Ferrell Netflix movie with Rachel McAdams, and it looks real bad, and I don't think I can stomach it. Artemis Fowl is on Disney Plus now, and I don't think I can stomach that shit either. So
Werewolf in London. Let's do it.
We could do American Werewolf in London. We might just, I don't know. We'll figure something out. We'll have a conversation off there, and we'll figure something out. We'll see. There might be something that comes along that we just don't know about. But we may take a couple weeks. But that's the danger of this COVID-19 world. Is it's not the summer that we're accustomed to, where there's good shit coming out week after week. We'll hopefully get back to that point, to close the loop on that discussion, but we ain't there now. So until our next episode, consume black media, follow our recommendations that we gave out on our last episode, read some books, watch some TV shows, watch some documentaries, watch some movies, watch the Five Bloods, shit. Do something.
Watching.
And stay safe. So until next episode, Andrew says,
take care now. Bye-bye then.
Laters on the Menjay.